You may wonder why these two watches, and you're fair to ask that. The first reason is they look incredibly good next to each other in a collection, and the second reason is my friend owns both of these, and it made me think of those two watches as a collective. I never thought of the Rolex Datejust and the Santos as being watches that go well together, because on paper they're actually very similar, but from a watch collector's perspective they are quite different, and bear with me, I'll explain why. Although neither need an introduction, I'll give you a quick background on especially the Cartier, because it will be essential to understand the point of this video. So the Cartier Santos was launched over 100 years ago at this point by Louis Cartier for his friend Alberto Santos. And over 100 years later now, the watch still looks pretty much the same in its design. And in the watch world, as we know, that's a pretty good thing. Take the Omega Speedmaster. It's not as old as the Cartier Santos, but the design is very much still the same than it was when the watch came out. Now, I'm not talking about the 57, but the later versions. Now, the Cartier Santos may not have the same impact in the industry, but it has come back in recent years, and whether that's because people after the pandemic realized that watches can also be assets, or whether simply fashion trends are going back towards vintage watches and classic designs, but that's a question for another day. Now, with all this talk about keeping it original and staying true to its design, Cartier, obviously they are offering this watch now with rubber straps, leather straps, different sizes, different materials, but they do this whilst staying true to original design. And that's not an easy task, let me tell you that. If you look at the Breitling Navitimer, they did exactly the same thing in a very, very classic fashion. The Navitimer is a watch that has classic design features, and if you tweak them too much, it's just not a Navitimer anymore. And the same goes for the Cartier Santos. If you take this watch and you do too many tweaks to it, it's not going to be the Cartier Santos, because it's a simple design and you have to be very careful as to how you will change it. So Cartier have been very, very successful in offering a wider range of watches with a wider array of materials, colors, combinations, skeletons, watches, while still being true to the original design, and at the same time appealing to now a wider audience. Because I can tell you one thing, 10 years ago, less than half the people that care about Cartier Santoses nowadays would have cared about it back then. So that's a really impressive thing. So that's all things Santos for now. Let's move to the Datejust. The Datejust really needs no introduction, so I will not lose time with that. As I said, these are two very similar watches in terms of their capabilities and also on paper. But from a collector's perspective, they couldn't be more different. Now, let's start first off with the similarities. They are nowadays both considered to be sports watches. They are both 100 meters water resistant. They have both in-house movements, although I have to say in terms of movements, Rolex takes the crown, pun intended. But we have a 70-hour power reserve, which is almost 3 days, whereas the Cartier has only 40 hours, so not even 2 entire days. As I mentioned earlier, both watches started off as very classy, classic design watches many, many years ago. And they are now being offered in a wide array of colors, style combinations and materials. The Cartier comes in full gold, it comes in two-tone, and it comes in steel, as you can see it here. Whereas the Datejust comes only in steel and two-tone. If you want the next thing to the Datejust in full gold, you'll have to go for its bigger brother, the Day. And whilst both being sports watches, they are extremely elegant in their design. I couldn't think of a more elegant sports watch than both of these. They are barely sports watches in that sense, but on paper they obviously are. And then the last similarity is the similar offering in sizes. Now, with both of these we have the larger versions. So the Datejust is a 41mm in this case, and the Santos is a 40mm. but you can get this in 35 and you can get the Datejust in 36. So again, similar offerings. So this is the point of this video. One of these I would wear every single day, whereas the other I definitely wouldn't.
That is indeed a controversial opinion of Nele right here. So if you have thoughts on this, please leave them down below in the comments.
Although they are similar, and you may ask, you list all of these similarities, so why would you not wear the other one every single day? Well, the thing is, Rolex has become this massive thing over the last decade. Rolex is now like one of those actors that everyone loves, but they can't go out a second in public without being recognized and being bothered by fans. And that's the case with Rolex. I know, it's a weird analogy, but the Cartier Santos is so understated and it will be your obvious everyday gentleman's choice. Therefore, I see the Cartier as never being possibly too much. It's appropriate for any occasion. Really, any situation, it wouldn't be too much in your face. And the Rolex, perhaps more your weekend type of watch or special occasions type of watch. And saying this with all the precedent things that I said about it being two similar watches on paper makes you think about these watches in a completely different perspective. And this is why, to me, it's so special having these two next to each other in a collection. And to me, they form such a good foundation for a well-balanced, well-thought-out 3 to 5 watch collection. So contrasting these two and seeing them as a collective within one watch collection was the point of this video, and this is why it was so special to me having these two next to each other. But now I want to know from you guys what you think. Do you agree with what I've said? Because obviously this was my opinion. Do you see them as similar watches? Do you even consider them as being sports watches? Do let me know down in the comments, and thank you so much for watching, and see you next time. Ciao.